Welcome to episode 18, What Would Love Do? This is going to be the first episode in an upcoming series on mindful love. And just a mindful, loving reminder that nothing in our podcast should be considered as medical advice. Our intention for today is to share with you how mindful love and asking the question, what would love do, can help create more connection, peace, and more love for yourself and others.
We hope you will discover how learning to pause and be present is critical to healthy relationships because it creates space. And it's in the space rather than in trying to change someone else where relationships change and we create more love. It's in this space that you can focus on how you want to feel. And if you want to feel love, asking what love would do is the magic question.
Our takeaways are a reminder of what mindfulness is, and that is it's purposeful attention to the present moment without any judgment. And mindfulness is key to having harmonious relationships with yourself and others.
Focusing on how you want to feel is also key. And if you want to feel love, showing up with love, without judgment, and with mindful intention is the answer.
So Jessie, you have, as long as I've known you, been an expert and have developed somewhat of a niche in relationship coaching. So why do you love coaching on relationships so much?
So as a physician, I like the science part, and science tells us, and for those of you who joined us for our book club on Together, that when our relationships aren't going well, it impacts not only our happiness, but also our health and our longevity. And then as a pediatrician, I see firsthand the negative impact that struggling relationships have really on all generations, whether they're with your parents, with your children, or with your partner. And then coaching, I have found to be the answer. It's the tool that allows us to make these incredible monumental shifts, because when we change ourselves through coaching, we can change a relationship. We don't have to have another person change. We don't have to fix them. It's taking the agency and ownership for what we want to see and showing up that way. That's magical. The other reason that I love coaching on relationships is my own personal experience. And I came to coaching when I was having some struggles in my own marriage. It was after more than 20 years of marriage to my high school sweetheart. So we have been together for a really long time, like over 35 years. And I found coaching at a time when he was struggling with some really common mental health issues. So I know that so many people out in the world have loved ones who are also struggling with mental health issues. And in that moment, I found myself just stuck and unable to see a way forward, wanting very much to figure out how to solve the problem, but that the tools that I knew and the tools that I had read about were not necessarily effective in this moment. And it was coaching that helped me find the solution. I found that calm and relief and peace. I was able to take back control by taking control of myself. And I learned how to navigate the bumps in the road of that intimate relationship much more smoothly. And then what I've discovered is that all that I learned there helps me navigate the relationships with my teenagers and my young adults and my own parents and my friends and my colleagues and really the whole world. And in my own case, this was true, but when your relationships aren't going well, they impact everything else. And so these core relationships, if we can nurture them and foster them, everything else begins to shift. And the way we show up for all the other work that we do in the world is so much more effective and healthy, and we are healthier. And that's how my focus on relationships sort of came full circle. And it really is what I love to do.
So I want to take a pause and just acknowledge that sometimes disharmonious relationships or relationships that struggle oftentimes has a component where one person's manual for the other person and vice versa comes into play when the other person doesn't know that their partner has a manual for them and what that manual even says. And so there's a mismatch in expectations that I think is really poignant in and important in pointing that out.
100%. I think this concept of manuals and expectations gets us all into so much trouble when we don't see it and we don't know what it is. And so knowing that we have that manual and expectations for others is really powerful. I see so many people who don't want to give up the manual and don't want to give up the expectations. And they think, well, if I give up the expectations of the other person, what will happen? And I think that's actually the crux of this question, what would love do? Because from a place of love, you can give that up, realizing that you want the other person to show up exactly as they are, loving you, and then you get to show up exactly as you are, loving them. And that's where more love comes. And so letting go of the manual and letting go of the expectations is really the gift of asking the question, what would love do? Because love would not have a manual.
Love would be willing to give up the manual.
Yeah, exactly.
And so how did the series Mindful Love come about?
So it came about actually thanks to you, because a week or so ago, I gave a talk to the women of Dartmouth in a series they have called Thrive. And what I learned through that is that relationships are an issue for so many people. So this was offered and 600 people signed up to spend an hour during the day, a work day, to come and find solutions to challenging relationships. And in that talk, I shared 10 tips in an hour and did some coaching. And I originally said, well, I just need to share these tips. There's so much wealth of information and there's so much need. And what I realized, thanks to you, is that each of those tips is really could be a whole episode in and of itself. And that taking the time to talk about them and really explore them and share how they work in life and have a conversation about them would actually be so much more valuable. I also realized that when I coach on relationships, I offer a group program called Mindful Love. And that actually does take 10 weeks to learn all of these things that I packed into 1 hour. And that being mindful, it doesn't do anyone any favors by giving them the cliff notes and leaving them to not do the work and not explore the work and let it sink in and be thoughtful about it on their own.
And why do you call it Mindful Love?
So getting back to that definition of mindfulness, which is paying attention on purpose without judgment, that when we approach love that way, rather than needing to fix the other person or needing to fix ourselves, we have so much more love. We often talk about, and in therapy, they talk about what you need the other person to do for you or what you want them to do for you. And we get into this sort of tug of war between people and who has which needs and all of those things. And so this concept of mindful love is that we're not fixing anybody or anyone. We're showing up with mindfulness, creating space, and then in that space, acting with intention. And so that first step is the mindful step. And without it, nothing else works. And that first step is pausing and being present. I spoke in a previous podcast about this idea of all I did to start was take one deep breath. And it's in that pause and in that space and in the breath that you find your strength and you find your path forward. And so that our favorite quote that we just seem to talk about all the time is, in the space between stimulus and response is where your control and your power lie. And that is where the love lies too. So in that space or the pause is where you notice. And then in that noticing, you can decide with intention how you want to show up. And another tool we've talked about a few times is showing up, asking yourself good questions rather than hurtful questions. Why didn't my spouse do this? Or why isn't it the way I thought it should be? Instead, asking good questions. And what would love do is the best question in my mind. It's a favorite question. And I pretty much now use it whenever I'm stuck or whenever I don't know. It's a starting point. It's really simple and it leads you to great answers. It sort of opens up your mind rather than closing down your mind. We've talked in the past about how shame and guilt and frustration and all those negative feelings really close things down. And this question, what would love do, to me, just creates space in the brain and in the chest, everywhere. So the one piece about it that people get stuck on, though, is we think, oh, it's what would love do for the other person? And many of us who work in medicine, we're always thinking to show up with compassion for the other person. And the key piece of this question is what would love do for you first and for the other person? But it's not exclusive of one person or the other. And I like to actually throw in sometimes when I'm stuck, for me, for the other person, for the world, for the earth, for humankind. And you can really like spread it out big. And then all of a sudden, all of the solutions sort of have space to show up. And so that's really the power of this, is creating the space. The mindfulness creates the space. The question creates like emotional space. And in that space is where the curiosity, another theme of mindfulness, can show up. And it leads to honesty also, is the one other key thing. So we often think that love, showing love for someone else, I'm going to do this out of love. But love wouldn't do something that you feel resentful about. I was talking to a client last week, and she mentioned following her husband for her job that her husband really wanted. But she was following him initially to be a good wife. And so we actually asked this question, like, well, what would love do? Would love go and feel resentful? Or is there a way she could go and feel good about it? And what she came up with was that if it was his dream job, love would go. But if it wasn't his dream job, because love would want him to pursue his dream, and it could turn out well rather than all the things that you might miss. That's another topic for another day. But asking that question rather than thinking like, oh, a good wife would do this. And so it's like, what would love do? Opens up all of these questions that she hadn't thought about. And so it does keep you out of this people pleasing, because we often do things when we tell ourselves it's from a place of love. But if you end up feeling resentful, it's rarely from a place of love. So I find this like love question makes space for me to see things from all different perspectives.
And this question of what would love do creates this openness that enables one to get rid of perhaps your own manual about yourself. That you don't necessarily have to have your own manual, and that you can use the present moment experience grounded in love to help guide you as to what your next steps can be for yourself, but also for your partner.
And I notice in what you just said, so many components of mindfulness, the present moment and grounded and noticing, all key pieces. And that's this component of mindfulness and love, which is something that I think bringing mindfulness to love brings such power and strength and more love.
If you think about it, what would love do? This question can be used in pretty much universal circumstances. You don't have to limit yourself to asking this question just amongst relationships, but it really could be a key in allowing you to broach situations purposefully with love, kindness, and curiosity.
I find actually it's really helpful, for example, if you are making a big decision. So maybe this moving decision, for example, would be one. And another one that comes to mind, which I know is a bit of a charged topic, but I think worth mentioning, is when perhaps a family member isn't making a decision that you think is good. And I know, particularly around COVID, this comes up a lot. People make different decisions than we think they should. And we love them and we don't know how to address it because it feels like changing them would be the answer. And so asking what love would do in those situations can also be helpful, even if they're a sister or a mother or a colleague. How would you handle that? And once again, love for you, because sitting there stewing in frustration and anger and worry and anxiety and all the things, that doesn't actually help anyone. And so when you're really in these difficult situations, I like to say when you feel stuck in any way, you can ask the question. And sometimes too, you can tweak it slightly. And so maybe you don't ask what love would do, but maybe you ask what peace would do. That's one that can come up a lot. Or what compassion would do can be really helpful with patients. If you're getting back to the love, I also think what love would do ties back into that ahimsa, do no harm question. And for yourself first, and for others. And so what love would do is that sort of peaceful yogic philosophy approach to the world that really does help us all show up in a way that is solutions focused and spacious. This idea of what would peace do came up last week, and I hope to talk about it more in our next episode where we talk about relationships with our mother, but it actually came up in the context of that. And sometimes that's the way to think about a loving relationship and actually change the question slightly to what would peace do? And it's thinking about how you want to show up. So paying attention to your intention. And if your intention is to have a peaceful relationship with your mother, or the other thought would be, say you're in an argument with someone, a peaceful resolution. What would peace do? It's a corollary to love, but feels slightly different. And sometimes if you don't love the person, it gives you space to show up in a similar way. Or what would compassion do?
And I just wanted to call out that these questions are not to be used in a way that makes you complicit to things that would potentially harm you. In, for instance, a lot of the false beliefs that people have surrounding COVID, and even in politics and this very charged time surrounding racism, what would love do doesn't make you complicit in condoning necessarily your loved ones' thoughts and beliefs that are not your own. So I just wanted to point that out, in that what would love do first and foremost includes what would love do for yourself first and foremost. And sometimes that means that there isn't necessarily peace because you are honoring your boundaries by communicating with your loved ones and sharing your beliefs. Oftentimes they're actually facts. And it's important to recognize the difference as well, that these questions are not meant to condone bad behavior.
There's two pieces to that I think are super important. One is sometimes love would leave. And so if you were in an abusive relationship, or say, someone's treating you badly, when you ask this question, what would love do? It would actually leave the relationship, because it's loving for you to not be there. And it's often loving for the whole relationship of the whole. It also can be loving, I think, to speak up. Love wouldn't necessarily be quiet. Love would say what was important. And love, and that's this thought, right? Avoiding resentment and speaking your truth and doing what is authentic for you. Love doesn't hide. And it isn't actually about peace per se, although perhaps internal peace and acting with alignment and really being consistent with your own values And that's once again getting back to what would love do? You have to apply it to yourself first and let that guide you. So sometimes love will change your thoughts and be more accommodating. Sometimes love would speak up. Sometimes love would make a change. And it's really assessing it in each moment, in that moment, with intention.
So do you want to share about some other situations in which you can use this tool with some real life examples?
Well, one thought I came up with to share is also the idea of how you want something to be. And so I recently wrote a blog post on a family vacation and how that question can be really helpful, whether it's family vacation or holidays, and just constantly asking yourself that question in the context of lots of different people with lots of different ideas, or even sometimes it seems obvious, like a toddler temper tantrum, what love would do. That pretty much comes naturally to many of us, although sometimes it doesn't, right? You're noticing in the moment how anxious you're being, but asking that question can help you there. But it can also help you in making a decision to, say, walk out of a controversial family conversation, or choosing to go take a walk. Sometimes it's doing something by yourself. Sometimes it's changing your plans because love would want to spend time together, and that's more important. So what I love about the question is it just creates this flexibility and spaciousness that isn't necessarily there. And we talked a bit about using it in non-loving relationships, but it can be really helpful in patient encounters. People who don't see things the way that you see things. And so giving you the space to accept and allow other people as they are. And that was your idea about the manual. Accept but not like. Sometimes love would accept a situation and not condone it, but choose not to like it. And the other thing is that love wouldn't disregard your own feelings. So say you're really super frustrated with someone, or you really wish that it were different. You get to keep that and own it and feel it. Because if you just decide, like, I'm not going to be angry about something that you're actually really angry about, love wouldn't actually ignore those feelings. It would allow them and experience them, but maybe not hold on to them forever. Let go and then move forward.
And so love is not a way for spiritual or emotional bypassing. This question of what would love do, what would peace do, is not for that purpose. So just talking about love that is not romantic. So can you tell us a little bit about how this would apply to like platonic relationships, between colleagues, between patients, and even our own household everyday encounters from someone, the cashier in the grocery store, or the mailman or woman, or even amongst one driver to the next?
Yeah, I was thinking that it even applies to road rage, right? It's like love wouldn't sit in your car and, raise your hands and scream at someone, first of all, because usually they can't hear you, but you're the one that's experiencing the distress. And so I think that love, first of all, wouldn't change other people. And that's where I think, whether it's a platonic relationship or not, we wouldn't be a loving human if we wanted to change everyone else. Although I will say that most of the time we actually show up wanting to change other people and thinking that we know best. And if we could change them, things would be better. But love would actually let other people be exactly as they are, whether they're your colleague or someone you live with, or the other driver. It doesn't mean that you don't speak up, but love lets them be them and you get to be you. Because if we want to change them, then we also have to change. And so realizing that love lets us all be human, it lets us be imperfect, it lets us mess up, and it lets us give space to other people so that we can also have space. Did that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely.
So I'm thinking as we get near to the end of the episode, I had two other thoughts. One is the intention piece, which we addressed a little bit, but this idea of tapping into the feeling that you want. And that's why I think this is a good question, because if you know you want to feel love and or compassion and or just peace, you can then ask that question and it opens your mind up to see solutions. And so it's the pause to ask the question and then let your brain see what it sees. Our brains are actually pretty miraculous when we give them space, and coming from a place of kindness creates a lot more space. And so being thoughtful about what is the feeling you want to feel. And of course, today we offer love as the feeling you want to feel, but it works similarly to ask that question, knowing how you want to feel. And then I wanted to end with a quote that I find really inspiring about love and about this concept of what would love do. And it says, "We're not held back by the love we did not receive in the past, but by the love we are not extending in the present." And so asking what love would do is choosing to extend love as far and wide as you can. But it's also starting with yourself and remembering that the heart nourishes itself first. And so similarly to our human physiology, when we send love and oxygen and nourishment to ourselves first, then we have more love, nourishment to send out to others. So I think that is why this question of what love would do is such a powerful question. Remembering that you start with yourself.
I want to reference back to a prior episode where you brought up the concept and the type of pottery in Japanese culture called kintsugi, where you're basically mending the areas of breakage of pottery with a different material to mend those areas of breakage into something that's stronger and something that's more beautiful. So thinking about love in this question of what would love do as that new material you use to mend and repair, as like the liquid gold that's used to mend and repair.
And realizing in that pottery, it is gold. And what if love were gold? The other piece of that that's so beautiful is that that material is sticky and it connects things. And love connects things and creates that connection. And that connection brings so much more value and beauty to the world. And what would love do works in that same way as like the gold pouring into all the cracks and allowing all the broken pieces to come together into something more beautiful and more valuable than it was before the cracks got there.
Stay on after for our mindful moment just right after the singing bowl. And if you enjoyed today's episode, we'd be so grateful if you followed and shared the podcast with others who might enjoy, and leave us lots of stars and great reviews.
Thank you all so much for listening. Have a beautiful week. For today's mindful moment, I wanted to share a mindful reflection on mindful love. Once again, thinking about what love would do. So take a moment wherever you might be and ground your sit bones into whatever you may be sitting on. If you're walking, perhaps take a pause. And if you are driving or not in a safe spot, please refrain from anything dangerous, because that is not what love would do. Take a moment to ground your sit bones deep into whatever you are sitting upon, noticing the strength from underneath, And drawing that strength up within you, up through the pelvis, through your spine, all the way reaching towards the sky. And drop your shoulders with intention. Take in a long, deep inhale through your nose and a huge exhale through your mouth. Place your left hand on your heart, connecting with your heart right underneath. Notice perhaps the heartbeat underneath, or perhaps you don't feel it. Notice when you press in gently that perhaps it spreads a tiny bit more good feeling throughout. Allow it and enjoy it. Love would enjoy it. Place your right hand atop your left hand. Notice the hands connect and the sensations of the skin upon skin, and enjoy that. And take a long, deep, nourishing breath once again through your nose. And a long, smooth, easeful exhale through your mouth. And close your eyes if it's safe and it serves you. And settle into your body here. When others are not acting as you think they should, your spouse, your partner, your mother, your father, your young adult children, your teens, your toddlers, your colleagues. It happens so often in every day. Can you ask yourself what love would do? Can you use that as a guide for your thoughts, for your feelings, and for your actions? When you wish you had done better or done something differently, can you reflect, what would love have done? Can you move forward from a space of love for yourself and love for others? Asking what love would do creates space to breathe, creates space to think, and it creates space for your heart to fill more completely. When your heart fills more completely, it nourishes and heals itself, the rest of you, and allows you to nourish and heal and love everyone else. Take a long, deep inhale through your nose. A long, smooth exhale through your mouth. And notice how you feel. Do you feel more love, more space? Love inspires. Love motivates. Love connects. Love is calm. Love is kind. Love is thoughtful. Love is spacious. Love does not blame, and love does not consume. Love is giving, and love finds solutions. Those solutions may be different in all situations, but love helps you find and see the solutions that serve both you and others. May you all be well. May you all be safe. May you all be loved, and continue to ask yourself what love would do.